And we're in something we call fragmentation. And so that's the challenge that I think school districts are having now. And there's more fragmentation than anything. The truth is you should only be really using two tools.
Hello there. My name is Monica Burns, and welcome to today's bonus episode of the Easy EdTech podcast. If you're used to joining me on Tuesdays for new episodes, you are in for a treat. This is a special bonus episode of the podcast in partnership with Jotform. Just like on Tuesdays, these bonus episodes are designed to give you ideas you can try yourself, share with a colleague, or bookmark for later in the school year. If we mention something you'd like to check out, you'll find the link to it in the show notes. So don't forget to head to my website, easyedtechpodcast.com, for all of the links and resources from today's episode. This episode is part of a special bonus series presented by Jotform. Jotform provides an all-in-one solution to streamline administrative tasks, enhance community engagement, and foster innovation. Using their no-code, drag-and-drop forms and workflows, your teams can securely collect and store data, automate routine tasks, and collaborate on team resources. Educational institutions are also eligible for a 30% discount on Jotform Enterprise. Head to their website to learn more. jotform.com/enterprise/education. And a quick note, this episode is part of a special bonus series. You can find the video version exclusively on Jotform's YouTube network. Today's episode is titled AI Ethics in Action, Bending the AI Curve with Nasser Jones, in a bonus episode with Jotform. Now, in today's episode, I'm joined by Nasser Jones, the founder of the nonprofit Bending the AI Curve. Nasser is on a mission to ensure that the future of technology is equitable for everyone. And we dive into the critical world of AI ethics and talk a bit about what it means to prepare all students for the age of AI. So this is a really thought-provoking conversation. You'll hear about his nonprofit work, the work that he does with schools and educators, and I think you'll have some great gems to bring back to your own conversations on AI ethics. Let's get into the conversation. Welcome to the podcast. I am so excited to chat with you today about a really big and very important topic of AI ethics and what this means for folks inside of education, outside of education. And before we get into all of that together, can you share a bit about your role? What does your day-to-day look like?
Yeah, my name is Nasser Jones, and thank you for having me on this podcast, Doc. I really appreciate it. I'm excited about being here, of course, being with a fellow educator. So my day-to-day job is I build custom apps for corporate and nonprofit and educational institutions. And I also run a national nonprofit organization called Bend the AI Curve.
Amazing. And those are all things I want to get into in our conversation today. And, you mentioned bending the AI curve, and that's kind of where I want to start with our conversation. Today we're talking about AI ethics, and that term that you use, when you say bending the AI curve, what problem, what issue, right? What are you referring to there?
Yeah. So literally 9 months ago, I was out of business. I spent the last 2.5 years telling people, hey, AI is coming for some jobs and maybe replacing some businesses. And I had a full service marketing firm serving educational organizations, college access professionals and such. And, my clients would come to me and say, oh, I just built a new website on Wix. I just built this great brochure on Canva, and great for them, not great, so great for my bank account. And so, been in the AI space since the very beginning, day one, since we launched on OpenAI or ChatGPT, and knew what we had on our hands. And so 9 months ago, I started pivoting into the AI space in a serious way and started looking at what could I get ahead of? Every time I would get ahead of something, OpenAI or Claude would come up with something and that little business and such. So about 6 months ago, I read 8 newsletters every single day. I know, total AI nerd, mostly around nonprofits, education, small business. And I started stumbling on this data that was coming out of MIT and Stanford, and hopefully not to nerd out on your audience here, but it started giving me this kind of disturbing trend. And I got ahead of something called vibe coding, which is really using, AI to help you build apps. And so I built a whole app store, and I was going to go down the traditional route, build the software, go get it funded, put it on Facebook, run some ads. But the data was starting to show that there's this gap that's happening in the AI space, where for some demographics in the United States, where they've spent $253 billion this year, they're up and to the right. It's exploding. The growth is exponential. But for the groups that you would expect that have always had gaps, you and I in the education space, we've always seen an education gap. We've always seen a wealth gap. We'll always see disparities in groups. But now we're starting to see that with AI. And so for many groups who are going up and to the right, for other demographics such as, schools, rural communities, indigenous, veterans, we're starting to see their curve kind of flatlining and in some cases going down. And so we have to really address this gap, or we're not going to be building the people power to actually be able to take on the jobs that all of this private investment is doing right now.
Yeah, and that phrase, bending the AI curve, I think is such a great visual for people who are trying to wrap their head around this concept that you are describing here, and many others might have seen in their own work, right, or seen in their own conversations with different people, right, in their lives. So when you hear this term AI ethics, what are the first maybe 2 or 3 ethical questions you want decision makers to ask before they dive into this world of AI, before they adopt a new tool, for their learning communities?
Yeah, so what I'm seeing happening in our space, especially the education space, is very reactionary response to AI ethics or AI policies or what we should be doing with students or teachers or our districts as a whole. And it feels like we need to just do some stuff. And typically they go in and they harass their IT department because we think it's a technical issue to be solved here. And, they're just trying to get up to speed on what the implications it means for them. So the first thing that I think about is, am I just being reactionary to what I hear in the marketplace? The second thing I would say that comes to mind is, we really need to be thoughtful as it relates to AI ethics and make sure it applies across the board. Because you can't very well say that students shouldn't be using AI in the classroom, but your teachers and administrators are. So that almost creates an adversarial relationship between teacher and students. I don't want my teachers being AI policemen in the classroom. I don't want that dynamic to be happening. And then the third thing is, I think that there are some ethical concerns. We do need to be thinking about what are the ways in which we can use AI as a tool that, I liken AI as a tool like Thor's hammer. It can cause a lot of damage, but there is far more good that can come from it versus the bad. So this is nothing that we need to be concerned about. We just need to be thoughtful in our approach and not be reactionary, and more strategic and more proactive, and really invite more constituents into the conversation. So if your board members are in the conversation, if your administrators aren't in the conversation, along with your teachers, your parents, the extended community, then I think you may be approaching it. And it does not necessarily have to happen at the level that an AI, what I call AI nerd like me, has to happen. You need the skeptics at the table. I'm an AI skeptic, and I'm also an enthusiast. And there's people all along the continuum, and they're all worthy to have the conversation.
I'm so glad you said that, because I think, in a lot of my work, I encourage people to hold what I call a healthy hesitation, right? And that's valuable, right? It's important, right? We should have this all the time when we're interacting with something that's new, right? Doesn't mean that we're a hard no, or that we're ignoring some of the things, that might feel like red flags or worthy of a little bit of a pause. And what you mentioned about that intention, right? The the ability to be proactive, right? When you can, right? To come out in front of something, to be transparent, right? In your conversations, like that teacher student example that you shared. These are all different layers that schools, leaders, classroom educators, right? All members of our school community can keep in mind, right? As they are deciding what's right for them. So, as we think about AI ethics and we think about the decisions that people are making, where do you see bias show up most often in these AI products that people may come across? Is it the data, the model, the user experience, the way the results get used? What kind of things are you seeing in the field?
Yeah, and some of it, if I could take a step back, some of it is really kind of the data that we start with,
Hmm.
right? And so you've been in education for many, many years, just like I have, and we've seen this bias show up in many different ways. How
Hmm.
students are disciplined, what courses are recommended to some students versus other students, and
Hmm.
where students get placed in the building versus other students. So we've seen this happen. But if your data is biased from the beginning, then it's going to be flawed in how you use it. But the beautiful part about AI today is that you can actually use the AI to help you analyze, is my data biased? And what are some of the ways in which this bias might show up in how I implement curriculum or how I
Hmm.
approach discipline or how I might approach my hiring practices, right? So you can use AI to get through that data so much more quickly, help you develop a plan, and then go about executing that plan. And even if you're kind of failing forward, the AI is good enough to adjust. So we're moving past the day where we're just using what I call the call and response. So I'll use
Hmm.
a song that we all know where you would see Heidi, 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 who, Heidi, Heidi. Right? So that's like how we use AI now, right? We put out a call, it gives us a response. And if that call that you put out is not informed, you're going to get an uninformed response.
Hmm.
And we really need to be thinking about agentic ways of thinking about how we approach AI. The same way that we're moving into an agentic way that the AI is now approaching solving problems. But if you don't approach it with that mindset, meaning that you're trying to solve this problem from multiple ways, then you don't even know what input to give it to help
Hmm.
you get the response out of that. Meaning now, today, you could literally have your AI set to be flagging things in real time. So if you're in a classroom, you're a teacher, and you have an agentic system set up, or you have it set up across your district, when a student is starting to have problems with discipline, which we know that discipline problems lead to academic problems,
Hmm.
instead of a whole semester going by, now we can flag that in the first 2 weeks of school and begin to provide one, interventions for the student, but also maybe the teacher just needs some coaching. So now the administrator can now get that data in real time and begin to come up with some solutions. But not only for the administrator, like the administrator may not be, they're consumed with discipline and leading the school and
Hmm.
meetings, all the things that come with that. But maybe the AI can actually give you some suggestions that you're not even thinking about. So it helps everyone in the whole process. But if you start with flawed data or you start with a flawed approach, and it's not flawed as in like you're doing anything wrong, it's just the technology is so new. And the other issue that we're creating right now, Doc, is we're creating a reverse problem. So the AI is supposed to help us work more efficiently, more optimized, right? All the things that are
Hmm.
supposed to be saving us time, energy, and effort. But when you go to your technical team and say, help us with a solution, they're scrambling to find anything that can help because they're just trying to push, push out whatever they can. So now you have a school district where you've got like 5 different AI solutions. What does that mean? What are the implications? Now a teacher now has to go learn 5 new tools,
Yeah.
and we're doing something we call fragmentation. And so that's the challenge that I think school districts are having now. And there's more fragmentation than anything. The truth is you should only be really using 2 tools. Whatever large language model that you want to use, if you want to use Gemini in your Google School,
Hmm.
or OpenAI or ChatGPT, which is great, or Claude, whatever that is. And then maybe another thing like Magic School might be helpful as well. But if you're using more than 3 tools, you're probably doing more, I wouldn't even say harm, but you're doing more You're adding layers of complexity that don't need to be. You just need someone to come in and help you compress that learning curve for your constituents.
I think that's a great reminder for someone who is making decisions on what do we want to invest our time in, our energy in, right? It's not just the dollars, say, if you're investing in a bunch of different tools, you have to factor in, right, the time to learn, to understand, to be able to switch from one to another, right? And if you have, just a couple things, it's a very different experience than if you're feeling overwhelmed, with a dozen things to choose from.
100%. And we're trauma informed educators, right? Like most of us are trauma informed. But the people that we don't talk about that had been traumatized for the last 25 years are our teachers, right? No Child Left Behind. Then it became core standards, and then this thing and that thing, and it's like whiplash. And every 2 or 3 years, something gets repackaged, sat on the teacher's lap, figure this out. Now we've added more layers to your work that gets you further away from what you signed up for. And then it stops becoming fun. And so that's what I'm seeing now in the marketplace, especially in schools where I go in the districts, is that teachers are just overwhelmed. And now here's this crazy new thing that I don't know anything about. I'm trying to hold it together. I have kids that are struggling. And now this new thing is being laid on my lap. And so we've traumatized the generation of teachers the last 20 years. And I want to work to help solve that.
Yeah, and I know that's a big part of, when I'm talking to educators about, it's not necessarily adding something to your plate, right? You might have, a few things that you're tackling now with this new tool, right? That will eventually, right, help take some other things, right, off your plate. A quick note from the presenter of today's episode, Jotform. Jotform lets you build a form in minutes. Student survey forms, homework submission forms, online quizzes, and so much more. You can start from scratch, or if you want to get a head start, check out their collection of free form templates designed with teachers, schools, and districts in mind. Learn more about Jotform and how educational institutions can get a 30% discount on Jotform Enterprise. Head to their website to learn more. Jotform.com/enterprise/education. Now, you alluded to the number of tools, right, that someone might have access to, but what are the biggest barriers you see, and that might be on the list here, to meaningful AI participation? Is it device access, connectivity, language barriers, trust, time, or something else that you would see as one of the biggest barriers to a meaningful, intentional participation, right, in using AI tools and strategies?
Yeah. So one of the things I talk to schools and businesses and nonprofits about is like slack. What is the slack in your organization that is preventing you from moving forward? Organizations don't drift towards simplicity. We typically drift toward complexity, right? So, oftentimes it is just your policies that are preventing you from even taking on a tool that could be seriously helpful. So I'll give you an example. So one of the biggest hesitations, now everyone's wanting to embrace AI or at least go into these waters. 6 months ago, that wasn't the conversation. There were all of these conversations about privacy and do we want to give our information to OpenAI and Claude and these other systems, right? And so that to me is one of the biggest challenges is wading through your policies and figuring out how to approach it. So that's one layer, like that has to be rethought, like from the ground up. And that's going to take some serious conversation amongst the board. And normally when you create these policies, there's been a challenge or an issue, the add a policy, and we never go back to revisit to say, is this policy even working anymore? So that's one just serious impediment. The other impediments look like practical things. It's like, how do we approach our curriculum design? How do we approach our discipline policy, and how can we use AI as a tool to help compress these natural roadblocks in creating a path to optimization with this tool?
And I think that, as someone who, again, right, working with schools, talking to lots of folks like yourself, you are seeing, right, some of the things that people are pushing back, or you're seeing some of the decisions that people are making about what they're comfortable bringing into a school community or bringing to their stakeholders. And I'm curious about some of the student interactions too, so kind of shifting from the decision making and what a teacher might do to what it looks like when you're having conversations or helping educators facilitate conversation with students. What does a developmentally appropriate conversation about AI ethics, bias, or even automation of using AI tools look like in elementary or middle or high school classrooms? How could someone listening today put an idea like that into practice?
Yeah. So, with this day and age of like vibe coding and creating apps, like if you're a teacher, you should be thinking about creating apps that can help your students work more efficiently. But let me start with the student and teacher conversation,
Yeah.
right? So we know that our students are using AI. Why do we know this? Because you're using AI. Right?
Hmm.
So we know that they're using it. The question becomes, what's an appropriate use? And what's an ethical use that you might use AI for, right? Are you just using it to get the quickest result that you can get, right? And so what I would be saying in my classroom is like helping students, and it takes a little bit of time for you to get up to speed too. So if you're a skeptic or, no, it's just no, right?
Right.
We're seeing this with students in English and writing,
Okay.
right?
Hmm.
English teachers are probably the biggest like resistors to AI, not necessarily because they're just obstinate. It's because they want students to still maintain their voice in their writing. And they
Absolutely.
recognize that just like cursive and some of the other, things that have kind of gone by the wayside, that there could be a likelihood that there's not a need for, more introspection in their writing. So I would be adding layers to the conversation with my students. So great. If you generated this with AI, do a video about your response or your prompt that I gave you. So now I can hear where you're coming from. So what I'm actually now working on is actually some AI technology for districts that can help students better maintain their voice. And what we do is we kind of walk them through waypoints, right? Like remember the old Oregon Trail, how you had to
Yeah.
go through the
Uh-huh.
different waypoints? And so we start off with like, what was the prompt about? And then it asks you a bunch of questions. But even before we get into that, I always like to try to use a little SEL as well. Like I want to know like where you are today, where you're coming from, how are you feeling today? So we start there. And that kind of gives that foundation of like, all right, the student's going to write differently if they're coming from a troubled environment or if they came from a family that everything's kind of going and is copacetic. So I want to know that, but then I want to get into like, all right, well, how do you approach this? Like, what's the research that you need to use? Where did you go to find your sources? Did you just allow the AI to pull the sources for you? So I want students to go through that whole process, right? And I want them to write and I want them to look at their punctuation. So the AI, because we're using agentic, that the agent is constantly making recommendations. But here's the beauty of where we are today. Even if you're the biggest skeptic, I can now so precisely target a student based on their performance. Are they a ESL student? Where are they at as far as their academics is concerned? What's their grade like? I can fine tune the AI to work on their specific goals related to my district goals, related to my state standards, and I can help move that student along the pathway so much more quickly instead of trying to use a one size fits all kind of approach. So those are some just basic things that a teacher could use. We could drill down on this so much, but we only have a limited time. But those are some like real quick nuggets that a district could be using today.
And that's perfect. I think for someone who's listening, who is kind of wrapping their head around what's possible, is looking to, is thinking forward of what the rest of this year, right, is going to look like for them, right, and the work that they do with their students. So before we officially finish up today, and of course I'm going to link out to all sorts of things so people can follow along with your work, I want to make sure people get a chance to hear more about the AI Academy. What's your mission with this project? And then of course, where can people connect with you and learn more about all of it?
Yes. So, bend the AI curves. That's my ethos is that AI should be for all. So I've created an app store that'll have 70 apps that are free. I don't want people to have roadblocks for being able to do their work. So whether you're working in a school, whether you're trying to write a grant, you need to write your resumes. Like, I want people to have access to AI in every way possible, and I want to give it away for free. And so this whole idea of bend the AI curve is bend the AI curve where you are. So the way that I bend the AI curve is I have built this app store, and that helps with people having access, right? So that's one. But you could be a nonprofit organization or a school, and you set up a computer lab where people from the community can come in. If you don't have access to the internet, you don't have access to AI. So as a school district, you can provide a community center where parents can come in and get it. I'll give you a quick nugget on this real quick. Most Latino families only have one smart device in their home, and now more school districts are not sending smart devices home. Many times it's just a cell phone, and sometimes it's not even connected to a cell plan. So you can imagine, with all these districts having everything online, a parent trying to pass around a cell phone to allow their students to do their work, or they have to go to the library. It just creates layers of complexity. So you can bend the AI curve wherever you are. So you can go on Bend the AI Curve, download the playbook for your particular demographic. The other thing that I'm doing is I'm launching a 10-city tour starting in Philly. We'll go to Chester. We'll go to the cities that have the most need: Chester, Wilmington, Baltimore, DC, Northern Virginia, Atlanta, Chicago, Detroit, Vegas, Phoenix, or Arizona. And then we'll come back here to Southern California, where I'm from. And we're launching this AI Academy for students of color. And the reason why we're doing that is because we know that these students in particular in these cities have challenges, right? They have it. So I'm starting pilots in every single city, and we'll go from city to city and do this whole week of AI conversations. Again, this is not a place that you would invite a guy like Nasser Jones to, because it's not for nerds. It's just to begin the necessary conversations that we need. But I also have this thing called MyAppy University. MyAppy University is a way that these demographics, if you're a veteran, you go on and you learn from a veteran of how to prompt, just getting comfortable with the technology, so it's approachable. And so if you're from a reservation, there's someone there teaching you about, but it's all culturally connected, culturally relevant content. What do you need to be thinking about on the reservation? Or what do you need to be thinking about as someone who is indigenous? Or what do you need to be thinking about as it relates to your place in the world and how this technology can help you? So those are the ways that I'm trying to bend the AI curve where I am. So if you're a district, you can bend the AI curve where you are. If you're a teacher, you can be bending the AI curve in your classroom. Or if you're someone from the community or a board member, there are ways that you can implement policies to help you bend the AI curve for your specific community. So certainly go on, check out Bend the AI Curve, and then my ethos, AI should be for all. If you need someone in to come help you, like when I come to do a training, I'm not coming in to do a training of like, how do we prompt? Like, no, I'm going to look at your biggest district problems, and we as a team, everyone in that room will open your computer and we're going to walk through that problem. And before we leave, we're going to have a roadmap to figure out how to solve it. But it'll help with the framework, like the agentic way that I think about approaching this, that when I leave, now you'll know how to approach the tools. So my goal when I leave is to take your 10% of what you're getting out of your AI tools right now and get you to 30, 40, 50% utility, rather than just keep adding layers of more complexity and fragmentation for your environment. So yeah, so they can find me online. I'm sure you'll share the resources with them. They can call me, connect with my team. More than happy to come in and help your organization. And if you work through Bend the AI Curve, there's not a financial situation for why I can't get to your school or your district, because I believe AI should be for all.
Well, this is fantastic. And I really appreciate not only, your time and your energy, but your fantastic strategies and resources that you've made available for educators. And we'll make sure to link out to all of that so people can find you and connect with you. But thank you so much for your time today.
You are so welcome. Thank you for having me, Doc.
This was a great conversation, and let's finish up like we always do with a few key points to make this edtech easy. The AI curve is widening, with some communities accelerating while others risk falling further behind. Schools often respond reactively to AI ethics, instead of taking strategic, inclusive, proactive approaches. Biased data can lead to biased outcomes, and AI can help analyze and surface inequities in curriculum, discipline, or hiring. Too many AI tools may create fragmentation, and most districts may need only a primary language model and possibly one additional tool. Remember, you can find the show notes and the full list of resources from today's episode by heading to easyedtechpodcast.com, including all of the ways to connect with Nasser Jones and the team at Jotform. A big thank you to Jotform, the presenter of today's episode and this special series. If you want to watch the video version of this episode, you can find it exclusively on Jotform's YouTube network. Just head to YouTube and type Jotform in the search bar. To learn more about Jotform and how educational institutions can get a 30% discount on Jotform Enterprise, head to jotform.com/enterprise/education. If you're listening to this podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or another favorite app, maybe even YouTube, don't forget to hit the follow or subscribe button. When you follow along with the podcast, each new episode will download for you automatically so you don't miss a thing. It's totally free to follow or subscribe. It just helps you get those notifications so you know when a new episode is available. And if you have a moment and are feeling extra helpful today, please leave a rating or review for the podcast. It helps other educators find this podcast when they're searching for topics like ed tech in their podcast app. Have a great week and check back on Tuesday morning for another new episode of the Easy EdTech Podcast.